Hello, everyone. This is Debra Richardson, and today I am putting the AP in Happy, where accounts payable teams are empowered to protect the vendor master file from fraud. This podcast will give a voice to accounts payable team members by talking about the growing reality of cyber attacks in their world and which vendor setup and vendor management techniques they can apply to protect the vendor master file from fraud. Need training? Visit the Vendor Process Training Center to enroll in your choice of weekly live and on-demand training sessions. Plus, get access to vendor setup form templates and reference tools that will help you and your team to reduce the potential for fraud, compliance fines, and just overall bad vendor data. So sign up for a free account to get access to free training sessions, vendor process FAQs, and a resource library with information you need to manage your vendor master file. Visit training.debrarrichardson.com today. The link will be in the show notes. An article outlines what's wrong with traditional cybersecurity awareness training against today's fraudsters, but misses the mark on the resolution to evolving fraudster tactics. So let's fill in the gaps. Keep listening. Welcome to episode 391. An article on the Deepfake CEO call confirms why cybersecurity awareness training is not good enough for AP and vendor teams. Okay, and so with this one, again, I get the prize for the longest title, and I don't even know if it's going to fit in the YouTube title bar when I post it, but we'll see what happens. I always have very long titles. But anyway, I saw this article posted, and I think it was this week because when I saw it posted, sometimes when I see things posted about what can be done to avoid fraud, I get a little peeved because everybody talks about that simple phone call, which if it was so simple, we would have no fraud. But anyway, I did post it on LinkedIn, and I just talked about, I think I said something about it misses what the article misses. And so, but I do want to go through it because it is right about cybersecurity awareness training and how it's just not good enough anymore, at least typical cybersecurity awareness training. So, first, I want to talk about the article, and then I want to talk about the gaps and how you can fill in the gaps with more than just the one resolution that they gave. So, let's go ahead and get started. So, the article was published on citybiz.co, and I will have a link to it in the show notes. And the article was called The Deepfake CEO Call: Why AI Voice Fraud is the Business Threat That Executives Keep Underestimating. And so, what they're talking about is one, and they do identify it correctly, is that attackers go where money moves. And so, finance is the one department that can move it directly. And when I talk finance, and so does this article, it says that's why CFOs, controllers, and AP staff are primary targets. So when I talk finance and I talk about, vendor or payment fraud, I'm always talking about the vendor process. And most times that's in with the AP staff. It could be a separate, vendor uh, team as well, and or the vendor function could be like in purchasing, or maybe a whole separate department. Maybe they have customers too. It's like a master data management group. But I'm typically talking about AP and vendor teams because that's where most times I find that it is. And so the article is correct in that it notes that these are the departments, or this is the group that the fraudsters target, because they know that that is where the remittance information is updated in the vendor master file. And when the pay files are pulled, either to go to the bank for ACH or wire payment, or to pull in the remittance address, and then that file is going to go to the printer to print checks. That information is coming from the vendor master file. And so this is why I really don't focus on invoices that much. Yes, I know fraudsters are sending fake invoices. However, they can't get the payment unless the payment information is changed on the vendor record. Now, that is if you are not using a credit card type payment. But if you are, you may have some fraud protections in itself. But if you are making an ACH or wire, right, your electronic payment, or if you are making a check payment, you have to update that information on the vendor master file. There should be no workaround to send that information anyone else to make a payment outside of the vendor master file. So you should have, or it should be required to change that information on the vendor master file in order to perpetrate payment fraud, to divert that vendor's payments. And so with that being said, AP staff, vendor staff, right, are the primary targets, because those are the ones that have access to update the vendor master file, or whatever team has that functionality if it's not with the AP or vendor team. All right. So with that, another thing they say, though, which is really good, is that psychology is the exploit. So, finance staff, they know the hierarchy. They feel real reluctance to delay or question a request that comes from the top. Right. And so the vendor or the CEO, because, right, this is an article about the deepfake CEO. And if the deepfake CEO contacts you, this is where they are coming from, or contacts the finance team. And so, as the finance team, understanding the hierarchy and fraudsters are playing into, right, cognitive behaviors, that if we have that we have authority bias, which means we tend to believe and want to please those that are leadership team members. And so, if that request comes, then the propensity is to go ahead and process that request. And so there you have it. If you have a deepfake CEO call, it is more than likely, according to the article, right, going to get processed, and a fraudulent payment will be made. And so they also go further to say, they have a little table here with verification method, why it used to work, and then why it fails against deepfake fraud. And it has 5 different entries. And so the verification method for the first one is recognizing the voice on a call. And they're saying it used to work because voices were hard to fake. And why it fails against deepfake fraud is a clone is built from seconds of public audio. So it used to be they were hard to fake. Now all you need is seconds of public audio. And I will tell you that is true. I actually used a free voice cloning AI or deepfake tool. And it was free, so you're limited on what you could do. But I was able to upload either. I don't remember if I uploaded my voice or if I just recorded it. I think I recorded it, but at the time I remember it saying it only needed like 3 or 6 seconds of a voice in order to, capture that voice. So just think about if your number gets called and you have your caller name, you speak your caller name. Well, you know what? That is enough to steal your voice. And so that was step one. It was really only two steps. That was step one. And then step two was to type in what you wanted to say. And so I did that. And it did sound like me, although it had some pauses there. But everyone should remember the example of $35 million being lost to fraud when that exact scenario happened. The deep fake of the finance director's boss uh, was enough to convince, the controller or whatever the position was to go ahead and transfer those funds. And that was, again, to the tune of $35 million. And what's worse about that, though, is that that was reported in 2023, I believe it was. However, it happened in 2020. So this is 2020 technology, and we are in 2026. So it's hard to do that. So they're right about that. And then the next one is the verification method of confirming by reply email. And it used to work because a spoof domain looked off. And so um, sometimes you can catch that, sometimes you can't. Everybody can't be 100% of the time, right? Even if it is a spoofed email. And depending again on how many emails you get, you may or may not notice that. Uh, because most times they'll put like an additional letter in there, or they will add a hyphen. And really, if you or your team doesn't have a relationship with the vendor, and you do not have an email address on file or a URL on file in order to know what it looks like, then how do you know that, right? It's not your vendor. So but it still used to work. It actually still works now because you got a bunch of lazy fraudsters that are, just registering domains with extra letters. But nowadays, he's right, because he's saying why it fails against deepfake fraud is because the mailbox itself is compromised. So the reply is genuine. And he's just saying that fraudsters are now in, right, your vendor's actual email inbox. And they may even be in your internal team members' mailbox if they are emailing you about a vendor change, or they could even be in your mailbox. So, he is correct in that. However, um, I guess it relies on the fact that you will notice that the spoof domain is a spoof domain. All right. And then the other verification method is joining a video call to verify. And why it used to work, because seeing the person was proof, but we know now it fails against deepfake fraud because real time video deepfakes, right, have already proven that they can fake the employees that are joining the call, trying to get authentication or trying to verify that they are the real people. We've heard about I think it was $24 million fraud that was transferred because multiple people from the same organization supposedly got on this video call, and it was enough to convince the finance worker to transfer that $24 million. And so that is why joining a video call to verify no longer works. And then the two more verification methods. The next one is checking caller ID. That used to work because the caller ID, right, the numbers used to be trusted, but we know now it fails against deepfake fraud because the caller ID is trivially spoofed at no cost. And then the last one, the verification method, the article actually lists annual security awareness training, and saying that it used to work because it taught staff to spot bad emails. However, it fails against deepfake fraud because it does nothing for authority-based voice manipulation. And so, what I definitely agree with that he is trying to say here is that, at least that's what I think he's trying to say, is that cybersecurity awareness training is not enough for the team that has the responsibility of adding vendor remittance information, changing vendor remittance information, and just maintaining that vendor remittance information in the vendor master file, because those team members are the ones that are targeted because, right, the fraudsters want to get the remittance information added, changed, updated, right, so that they can divert the vendor's payments. But the big miss in this article is that it only gives one option to combat, all of it. It does say why the verify by call no longer works. And that's when it starts talking about all the verification methods. But it appears that the assumption is that the call is coming in versus going out. And so, what it offers as the ultimate resolution is to make the call. So don't rely on a call coming in. Don't rely on jumping on a video call. Make an outgoing call to a pre-established number, not the number that came in with the request, in order to validate the change. And in this case, they're talking about banking details change, but it could just as well be remittance change. I recommend you do the same thing for both, since fraudsters are after checks as well. But it does give that option, and that's not to say it's not a good option. It should definitely be part of your controls. I don't think it should be your only control. And that being said, it's not the only control that you can put into place. But with that control, let me just say, you still have a lot of problems. So anybody that says, right, that, make this phone call and that's the ultimate solution. Well, if that really was the ultimate solution, I think I said it earlier in the podcast, we wouldn't even be on the call, or we wouldn't even be talking about it, wouldn't even need the article, because everyone would make that phone call. And I do realize that some people are not making the phone call, but you know what? Some of them are, and it's still resulting in payment fraud. And part of the reason is, and this is the reason why it's not so easy, and you guys probably know this just like I do, is that pre-established number, the assumption is that you have one. And in many cases, especially if you inherited a vendor master file, you may not have right, contact information on hand for the vendor. And if you do have contact information in your vendor master file for the vendor, it may not even be for the accounts receivable team or the team that you need to contact to verify that banking details request. And so, or the remittance address change request. And so it sounds like it's easy. And yes, it is a great thing to do. However, it's not as easy as it sounds. So even if you do have contact information, many times, right, vendors just don't pick up the phone. You have to contact them multiple times. And sometimes now, when you do get a hold of a vendor or the AR team or the correct team member, they can't confirm with you over the phone anyway, because they have been told not to verify banking on the phone. Because if you think about it, they don't know who you are either when you contact them to verify banking. And you just wait until you get a call. And maybe some of you are also on the AR side, and so you know what this feels like when you get a call by someone saying that they want to confirm your banking. That's not a small thing that you just take with a grain of salt and just keep moving. It does shake you a little bit because somebody is asking for banking over the phone. But that is one of the reasons why I'm a big advocate for making that confirmation call the correct way, having the script, documenting it, right, so that you know what's still pending. Because again, vendors are not going to pick up every time the first time. Actually, most times they won't. And so it's just not as easy as it seems. Now, I do have a confirmation call toolkit. And if anyone listening is in my or has a vendor process training pass, from the Vendor Process Training Center. You do actually have access to it. It's included in the training pass, and you get scripts, you get confirmation log. You actually also get a best practice document so you can put it into place. And it goes over things like, well, what do you do if you've contacted the vendor, I don't know, 3 times and you're not actually able to get them? What do you do with the request at that point? And so this kind of skips over all of that, assuming that making that out of band callback to that pre-established number is just so easy that that's all you need. But it's not all you need. I actually posted this on LinkedIn, and I included some comments saying, you can always implement things like authentication techniques, just like the bank does. So when the or when you contact your bank, the bank always asks, either through the IVR or through the rep that gets on the phone, and sometimes some cases both. They will ask identifying questions. And I know some of you are out there going, yeah, but they pretext the vendors to get that information, and so they already have it. Well, no, they don't. You have to ask for multiple pieces and make it random so you're not always asking for the same thing every time. And by the way, the fact that the fraudsters are pretexting the vendors trying to get the information that you were going to ask to authenticate them uh, is one of the reasons why when you go to search for your vendor's contact information, and let's say you do have the proper URL for that vendor on file, because you never want to search for it in just like a regular search engine, because fraudsters know how to get their spoof sites above your vendor's real site. But let's say you go to your vendor's real site because you have it on file, but you don't have the contact information. You go to look for that contact information, and that has been taken down because the vendors do not want their team members pre-texted. And so you do have to make sure that you are collecting the contact information for the uh, person or the team, the group that can confirm change requests. And so you put authentication techniques into place, one of which is asking those identifying questions, just like the bank. You collect that vendor contact information at the time of setup. So when you need it, you'll know who or what department to call. And then you also have other internal controls downstream so that if the fraud attempt is not recognized in the initial steps, then you will catch it in subsequent steps. And so it's not just that one callback, phone call that is going to stop the fraud. You need to surround that confirmation call with authentication techniques, with internal controls, best practices, vendor validations. Now, have talked about some of these things on different podcasts, and let me just give you a couple that you can listen to. So I talked about authentication. I do have a YouTube video, and I'll put a link to that on or in the show notes, and it's called Authentication. And I talk about what you need to do to authenticate or identify that your, requester is who they say they are, that they are the actual vendor, they are the actual your actual internal team members, if that's how you get information to update your vendor records. Now, as far as podcasts, the first one is the company branded vendor forms you need part 2. It's episode 296. And so I talk about what you can include on the company branded vendor form in order to collect that, what I call authenticating data. So check that out. And then episode 274 is here's what to do when your vendor's policy is not to confirm banking via phone. And you might be running into that more now than you used to, or if you haven't run into it yet, you might. And then the last one that I want to give you now, let me just say I've got a ton. You can just go to wherever you listen to my podcast and just type in vendor banking or just banking, and you'll come up with a lot. But the last one that I want to give you is I shared a confirmation call script. Actually, I shared a few of them, but episode 315 was confirmation call scripts number one, changing bank details for ACH wire payment. And so I walked through what that script needs to say in order to have a valid confirmation call. And I say valid because again, sometimes these confirmation calls are made and they're just not valid. Payment fraud still occurs. And so this will help you develop a script that you can then share with your team members that actually make those calls. But again, I have so many out there. I just wanted to give you the ones that I think would be most relevant based on this podcast episode. But I have, what is this, episode number 391? So I have 390 other podcasts that are still very relevant and can help you with a process A to Z. Just go in and search for other episodes that may also help. All right, so thanks everyone. I hope you enjoyed the 391st episode of the Putting the AP in Happy podcast, where accounts payable teams are empowered to protect the vendor master file from fraud. Don't forget to check the show notes for the links mentioned in the podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing and writing a review of my podcast on the platform that you use to listen. Stay happy.